Hey, and peace be with you. Welcome to The Explainer. We're really glad you're here with us for what I think is a pretty important conversation.
So what is Islam really about? Look, if you've ever asked yourself that question, you're definitely not alone. I mean, it's a question that gets kind of lost in a world just filled with so much noise and conflicting info. So for this explainer, let's try to do something. Let's set all that noise aside. We're going to go straight back to the source, Have a calm, honest look at what Islam is, what it isn't, and what it really truly stands for. All right, so let's jump right in. And the best place to start is with the most basic, fundamental stuff. What do these words actually mean? Okay, so the word Islam itself, it comes from this Arabic root, S-L-M, and that root is the foundation for words that mean peace, wholeness, and submission. And this part is really key. Being a Muslim means finding that peace by voluntarily, and that's the important word, consciously submitting to the one God. It's framed as a choice, not, a command.
Right. And then there's the word Allah. A lot of people get confused by this, but it's really simple. It's just the Arabic word for God. That's it. It's not some different, separate deity. It's just like how a Spanish speaker says Dios, or a French speaker says Dio. An Arabic speaker says Allah when talking about the exact same creator.
So, okay, how do these words, these core ideas, build into a whole worldview? Well, Islam isn't just one single belief. You can think of it more like a framework for life. And it's built on three big interconnected parts. First, you have belief. In Arabic, it's aqidah. This is your faith in God and angels, prophets, all of that. Then you put that belief into practice, or ibadah. These are the actions, like prayer or giving to charity, that are all about connecting you with God. And then, wrapping around both of those, you have ethics, or akhlaq. And that's all about striving for moral excellence in, every part of your life. So what's the point of all this? What's the goal of this whole framework? It's really to guide someone towards a life that has real purpose, a life of responsibility and dignity. And the whole point, the big takeaway, is that it's all meant to help you find a deep, lasting sense of inner peace.
Okay, now we have to talk about the elephant in the room. This is probably the toughest topic, the one that causes the most fear and confusion. We need to look head-on at the relationship between this faith and the actions of extremists. So let's just be blunt. Let's ask the question I know is on a lot of people's minds. Is Islam, the religion itself, responsible for the terrorism we see on the news? To kind of unpack this, let's look at an analogy that comes up in the source material. Think about this. Hitler was raised Christian. His regime murdered millions of people. But would you ever blame the teachings of Jesus for what he did? Of course you wouldn't. And the same logic applies to this next example. Stalin, he was a committed atheist, and he was responsible for the deaths of millions more. But does that mean atheism as a concept teaches murder? No way. The point is, you just can't define an entire belief system by the horrific actions of people who twist or completely ignore its core principles. And this is the most crucial distinction we have to make. On one hand, you have Islam, a personal, spiritual faith. It's about a person's relationship with God. On the other hand, you have Islamism. That is a political ideology. It's a movement that hijacks religious language and symbols for one thing: power. They are absolutely not the same thing. In fact, if you go to the source, the core teachings of the faith are the complete opposite of extremist violence. I mean, just look at this quote from the Prophet Muhammad. He says, "A strong person isn't the one who can beat people up. It's the one who can control themselves when they're angry." So extremists aren't just misrepresenting Islam. They are actively violating its most basic fundamental principles. All right, let's shift gears a bit. I want to tackle another really common misconception, this idea that faith and reason can't coexist. That Islam is somehow against science or human rights. Well, far from discouraging it, Islam actually commands its followers to learn and to think. The Qur'an is filled with questions like, will you not use your reason? Will you not reflect? And then you have this teaching from the Prophet that makes it crystal clear. Seeking knowledge isn't just a good idea. It's a religious duty for every single Muslim. And what's really amazing is seeing how this played out in history.
While Europe was going through its so-called Dark Ages, the Islamic world was experiencing a golden age of discovery. Just think about it for a second. The very foundations of algebra, modern surgery, huge leaps in medicine and astronomy. So much of that came from brilliant scholars like the ones you see here. Their work literally helped build the modern world we live in today.
Okay, and that brings us to another huge question, one that gets a lot of attention. What does Islam actually say about women, their status, their rights?
If you go back to the source, it's actually incredibly clear. Islam teaches that men and women are spiritual equals, full stop. And here's a powerful historical fact. The very first person to believe in the message of Islam was a woman, Khadija. And she wasn't just anyone. She was a highly respected, wealthy, independent businesswoman who hired the Prophet. So when we see oppression in some Muslim-majority countries today, the sources tell us that stems from local culture, from ignorance, or from politics, not from the faith itself.
And this all circles back to a core principle that really applies to everybody. This single verse from the Qur'an, there is no compulsion in religion. It's one of the most cited and foundational verses in the whole book. And what it means is that true faith has to come from the heart. It has to be a conviction, not something that's forced on you. Okay, so as we start to wrap this up, let's try to boil all of this down. What is the core, unchanging message of the faith when you strip everything else away?
When you clear away all the noise, all the misconceptions, you're left with a really clear contrast. Islam is not about domination. It's not about fear. It is about personal transformation. It's about being guided by faith, kindness, and a deep commitment to justice.
And for more than 1,400 years, this has been the essence of it all. That God is one, that all of us, all human beings are created equal, that our lives here have a real, profound purpose, and that in the end, truth always, always shines through the noise. So I'll leave you with this final question to think about. In our world, which is so full of complicated stories and angry debates, what if the simplest truth is actually the real one? The truth of peace, of purpose, and of submission to one merciful creator. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.